So we're coming down to the close to the end of the year. I want to welcome everybody to the Thursday Pivot. Thanks so much for coming out. Special thanks to Alan for coming out. Give you a little bit of background. Alan is the Vice President of Travel Guardian Insurance, and he's going to take us through the next steps of traveling and what that might look like and what it looks like today. Travel Guardian is a leader in the emergency travel insurance space, providing tailored travel insurance solutions around unique needs for individual clients. Travel Guardian's leading edge extensive product line offers the most affordable rates to provide solid protection. Right. Tell us a little bit about how you get started in the travel world, in the travel insurance space, and let's just launch right into it. Everybody here is familiar with travel, so let's just launch right into the big issues.
I've been in this industry for the last 21 years now, which we're out of high school, so don't do the math there, but I've been in this industry for a very long time. When I first started, it was just a very small company, and then we just grew dramatically every single year. And we specialize in travel insurance, mainly the snowbird market, so people that travel for the winter. Very interesting industry, I'll say, as the industry is very unique and very difficult in ways, but very fun at the same time.
Travel is one of those things I think we took for granted so much prior to this pandemic. How many people, what's the stats there on how many people prior to the pandemic would travel without travel insurance?
Yeah, so statistically, there's it depending on the group and the age, but as the younger you go, yes, the more percentage people would travel without coverage. Some people just automatically think they have coverage, especially the younger people. They just don't even think about it whatsoever. Now, as this pandemic arose and it's all of a sudden it's in the back of people's mind. Now it becomes in the front of people's mind. Now people are flocking to travel to us or to the industry to ask questions about what it is and what we do. So percentage wise, I don't really know the exact number, but yeah, it's definitely was more. And as we move along to the next phase, when COVID is over, I believe that almost every single person they'll be questioning it a little bit more. So that's good.
I absolutely agree with that. Now, the travel industry has reacted by offering travel insurance for people who are traveling, regardless of the border closures and regardless of the risks associated with traveling. So take me through what COVID coverage while traveling now. So let's say, I decide I'm going to go down to Florida because I have a winter home there and I'm a snowbird and I'm just going to go. I call you up and I say, listen, I hear you have travel for COVID. What does that look like? And how does it compare? It's a loaded question, but how does it compare to the travel that I could have purchased last year?
Yeah, this industry has definitely changed. If you asked me what kind of options there were in August, there are pretty much no options of travel insurance for COVID out there. September kind of rose, and actually Ontario Blue Cross was kind of the first ones to provide COVID coverage, and all these other underwriters were looking at them and questioning, why are you doing this? But that started that domino effect. So if there's a demand for it, they're going to change and they're going to evolve their underwriting to get COVID coverage. And the difference of what COVID coverage is compared to like regular plans of just accident and sickness is every company has done something different on their own. So there's some companies that just added addendums to their policy saying, this is your coverage, it's added onto their policy. There's other ones that say you have to purchase a separate COVID rider attached to your travel insurance policy as well. Some are very different from providing, say, the maximum limits. So anywhere from, say, 100,000 of COVID coverage only, 200,000, 500,000, 1 million, and some to the policy limit. So every company has done something different, which is a little bit harder, especially for a broker to shop around and figure out what is the best plan for each person.
Well, and I also hear from clients who call and say that they're getting calls from American-based companies offering Canadians travel insurance for when they come in. So they're saying that if you can't get the coverage in Canada, we're going to offer it here. Now, my first thought on that would be, well, then there would be no medical evacuation. There would be no returning back to Canada, because how can they include that? Are you familiar with those policies?
There's always been U.S.-based insurance companies that provided, say, visitor to the U.S. coverage, but they look at travel insurance or that industry very different. So you do have to be very careful on, like, say, policy limits or the benefits that are included with it. So when we've done say comparisons from what we provide in Canada compared to the US, it is quite different. So even if companies in the US have a better price, yeah, there's obviously different reasons for that. So you got to be very careful on that, even including with COVID coverage.
And the other, so let's come back to Canada then, and say, okay, now we have somebody who's purchased a COVID travel policy. I have, when I've had conversations with those in the industry, and yourself included, and not that you have said this specifically, but I have heard that it is a different policy. Like you've said, it could be a rider, it could be an amendment, it could be a different policy or standalone. But I have heard it's very, very different from what we could have purchased last year because of the known risk situation. So let's say you buy a policy today that covers off COVID, but because of the known risk situation, some of those items that we were used to having in, we may have coverage for COVID, but we no longer have coverage for those other items because of the known risk situation of the borders being closed and the travel advisories in place.
From that, yeah, so there are some plans out there that will give you COVID coverage, but it doesn't provide anything else. Actually, WestJet and Air Canada actually provide insurance for COVID coverage, but again, it doesn't provide anything else that people don't really realize. Purchasing COVID coverage, or say plans with regular, like a normal travel insurance plan that's out there with us, almost every plan would treat this COVID coverage just like anything else. So they treat it like if someone were to get pneumonia or a broken leg, they'll treat it the same way. So I think you'd have to just be careful about what each plan is and what they cover and what their benefits are. So you just have to kind of read a little bit more into different plans, and including actually like even countries are actually providing some COVID coverage. So if you go to Mexico or Dominican Republic, some of them are providing COVID coverage. For them, they rely on this money. They'll rely on all these people traveling to their country. Some cities are just like their whole industry is there's tourists, right? So they need to start kickstarting people trying to go to their country. So that's what they're trying to do with the government anyway.
The other item that I have heard is that and I shared this with you yesterday or the day before, is on some existing policies that will cover COVID. So they've added the addendum and they've put the COVID coverage in there. What they've also said is that they're only going to cover if it's a hospitalization. So somebody, unless they're reading the exclusions on that, they may assume a COVID coverage, but if they're medically quarantined or waylaid due to COVID, there's no coverage for that. They're only going to have coverage if they are actually hospitalized.
No, the plans that I've seen, almost every plan will treat it like every other plan. Like if you had to go to a MediCenter or this just to get tested, the testing itself wouldn't be covered. But if you get a positive test, there's only a few plans out there that would provide extra benefits. So if with COVID, just because you get tested positive doesn't necessarily mean you're hospitalized, right? Sometimes you're home and you have to be quarantined for 14 days or whatever the required amount is. So there's only a few companies out there that will provide extra benefits. So like say $100 a day for necessary quarantine at destination, or up to $500 of perishable goods during delivery during the quarantine. So extra benefits are provided only on very select plans.
Yeah. So, hey, Alan, I was talking with a wholesaler. I don't really want to mention the company here, but it's in relation to Manulife's coverage that's offered through Air Canada ticket purchases. So I was told that for people who purchase these tickets and are offered this, COVID coverage, although I don't know if it's an addendum or, just standalone COVID coverage, but for people who are looking to purchase a standalone policy, that standalone policy cannot coincide with the coverage that's offered through the ticket purchase. It either has to be purchased for standalone coverage outside of the 21-day period that COVID is covered, or it has to be in lieu of, or completely overriding the 21-day coverage that's being offered. Can you kind of go into that a little bit and talk about why that might be?
Some insurance companies, they're kind of finicky with certain things and what they like and what they don't like. So I could see especially because COVID is very new. No underwriter has kind of gone through this, and so it kind of caught them by surprise. So they don't have history about even before some of the costs associated with COVID and how much it would cost. So it's hard for them to put a risk on it. So I think in their case, they're trying to be risk adverse and just say, okay, well, these are our rules and we got to just stick with it.
What makes Travel Guardian different in its approach to this pandemic coverage?
Because we're a broker and we deal with most of the plans in the market, we, knowing almost everything that's out there kind of provides us benefits to understand what the clients are looking for, and then just shopping to figure out, okay, this is what they really need. Having more options, we're not biased towards one company. We don't have to use that one plan if it's not good for someone. And that's beside COVID or not, that's just how we worked, and that's usually what we say anyways, right? So just because, a wife might be on company A, but a husband might be on company B, sometimes it just works out better that way.
Claudia, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you won't mind. What's the top questions you're getting from clients that are calling in with regards to travel?
Basically, much what Alan's saying. It's is there any restrictions on travel? So if you're going into those known where it says, you're not supposed to travel, the travel advisories are on. So that's a big one. And it's, the usual, if you're being told by government not to go somewhere you're not supposed to go kind of thing. The other one is what the stipulation is. So with ours, and I don't know if it's the same with the Travel Guardian exactly, but if you're within a certain amount, so if you're within the 14-day quarantine period, and you get it, there's an actual exclusion. So for instance, if you travel to the US and within the first 14 days of your quarantine, you get COVID, you're actually not covered because it's considered pre-existing. So it's those kind of like the little finite ones that are because now if you get it after the 14 days, you are covered because it wasn't considered pre-existing. So it's a lot more of the technical aspects of it and how long that they have to wait, or if they totally disregard the 14-day quarantine period and then they get it, they wouldn't be covered. So it's more the pickier items, I guess, where people just don't realize it. And they'll say, well, what if I go and, a week out, I get it.
That's an excellent point. I hadn't even thought about that quarantine period and it being pre-existing coming in. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Have you had any claims fall into that, Alan, that you've had to deal with?
No, Claudia made a really good point about that. And that's not just that plan, but almost all of them on the market work the same way. No, we haven't had any denied claims or claims that have been arose from that yet. We've heard just a few claims that have happened, not with our clients, but with partners of ours. And one company only had 200,000 of coverage, but then they changed their limit to $500,000 because one of their clients was in New York and got flown home actually afterwards. And that costed $450,000 at one claim.
Can you speak a little bit to the claiming process? What does that look like?
It's the claim would be exactly like any other claim and how they treat it. During COVID times, I mean, it'd be maybe a little bit different regarding, say, the pricing. At the beginning, when things weren't so crazy and hectic, and depending on the area you're in, the claims were less than what they are today. They've gotten more expensive as time goes on. And so that itself poses problems for the underwriters and trying to just calculate the risk and calculate, say, the cost associated of how much they should be charging. So I know that some companies have changed their pricing a couple times over the last few months. But I think maybe one of the biggest differences is trying to get flown home. Right. So if someone can someone get flown home if they actually have COVID? The answer is yes, but there's a lot of loopholes and a lot of red tape around it, as you can only imagine. And people don't realize, even just on a regular basis, even without COVID, the process that goes into trying to get someone home. You have to get approval from the doctor down there. You have to have the insurance companies obviously have to approve of it, but they have to get the organization of the flight, and then they actually have to have a bed back home. You can't just drop them off at the airport and there you go. So it's a big process, and now with COVID and everything else happening, it makes it even a bigger problem.
Well, that brings to mind a question that just hit me is, are prices for medical going up for visitors too? So if we're constantly complaining that, we don't want to put a strain on our medical facilities, what about in other countries? So let's take that person down in New York who's now using the medical facility there. Have they upped their pricing for even taking care of people in that regards? Like, have those costs gone up as well?
The U.S. medical system in general is always a problem. So the prices associated with it vary from place to place. We've heard of hospitals literally like 8 miles apart having totally different pricing ranges on everything. So that itself is a problem in general. So as far as like the demand of what's happening in the world and where they're located, the prices are definitely padded, you can say.
Sure. Is there like any kind of concern amongst the travel only insurers that COVID's going to pose like a longevity business risk for them? Like, is there any kind of insolvency issues or like concerns at this point amongst like individual insurers?
I think it depends on the underwriter and their risk and how the history behind this year. So, and it depends on what's going to happen in our future about just getting a vaccine even, right? So if we get a vaccine sooner than later, then, who knows? We need to know some of the history behind it. Like if you get a vaccine, but can you still get COVID, because it's only a 95% chance. And then it has to be related to the risk or their claims history on it. I always say, the insurance companies are not in it for fun. They're still a business. So they still got to look at the record. Now, there are some underwriters that we've worked with, they do look at one-offs, meaning they might look at this past year and saying, okay, well, we thought that we were going to charge this X amount for COVID coverage and we got crushed on our claims. Well, that they might push that aside and move forward, or they might want to try to recoup that cost and just try to up their rates. Every company is very different, and we work with most of them. So, and generally, it's hard to say what the industry as a general are going to do as opposed opposed to which each underwriter is going to be.
Okay, and so when you're talking about the hospitals just down the road from each other having pricing discrepancies, how is the insurer establishing like reasonability guidelines and I guess protocols in their claims?
Every claims department, claims assistance will have usually price lists and almost like generic guidelines that they go by. And each company might be a little bit different from one another. So one company might have a very strong hold in Florida and they might have very good pricing in there, but they might be a little bit weaker in other places. Whereas some of the larger underwriters, like say Manulife, they might have a stronger, say price listing, and because they're a bigger company and a little bit more global, they might have a little bit more power and to reprice it at a certain price point. So they always have lists. So there's if an angioplasty would cost like 150,000, they're like, okay, well, this is our price list. It should be about 100. And they kind of go back and forth, but that's generally how it goes.
I'm concerned about what the premiums are going to look like once we're out of the pandemic exposure based on the number of claims. Will we be able to see reporting on what claims have been during that time period and what claims were specifically for COVID? Do you think that those kinds of reporting will be released?
The underwriters they're generally pretty good with releasing certain things to the public. So, and regarding COVID, this will be one of them.
What's the emotion? And again, I'm going to blame Tim for this one, but it really was a great add-in to talk about. What's the emotion regarding people traveling? I know what I'm hearing from people who call me, and it seems like, you know, the emotion is taking over the reality. What are you seeing come through in weighing those items out?
I would probably categorize it in almost two different ways. People that normally travel less than 30 days and people that travel more than 30 days. So the snowbird market for the most part, and then people that take their all-inclusive cruises and all that. So, and it depends on the age range too. So the younger the person, the more they're wanting to just almost take that risk. The seniors, if as much as we would think that they would want to stay home, those snowbirds, all they want to do is go down south and even just isolate down. So they're literally living how they would here, just in warmer weather. And they say that as long as I can get down there, I'll just self-isolate if I have to. The hard part for them, there's differences. So I'd say about 30% of people are snowbirds are actually still traveling. The hard part is how are you going to get down there? And normally that when they take their RVs or they're flying or driving, then they can't do that anymore. So people that are flying, that's fine, and they're finding ways. They're actually a lot of transport companies are actually taking their RVs or cars down south. So they'll fly down and just transport their vehicles down there.
I find that so interesting. We have the most at-risk population willing to travel. I literally had a client give me a call, and I said to him, I'm not going to say his name, although I don't think that he would see this. I said to him, so and so, the borders are still closed. I'm a little concerned. You're 83. And he said to me, he's like, Lori, and I've known him for 22 years. Lori, don't worry about it. I'm flying over the border. Closures don't matter.
Can I ask Alan a question sort of on that vein? And you're right, Alan. I read an article in the Globe, I think a week ago, some company in, so this is more Southern Ontario, Buffalo, what they're doing is, so a helicopter company had initiated this, and they're just flying the people over the border quickly, and then they've coordinated with a transport company to just move their car over the border, and then they hop in their car and off they go. But question is, because it raised a really good point, and one of my business partners, and yes, we guilted him a little bit, Laurie, but he still went. So he's in Fort Myers now, enjoying his golf bubble. But it raises an interesting, I think, question, it's not really COVID related, but often in employee benefit plans, you've got the business owners, you know, who are members of the benefits plans, but perhaps, like my partner, moved into a snowbird status and may incorrectly believe that, oh, well, I'm on the benefits plan, I can go to Florida for 6 months or whatever, and I'm good, right? And what they're often violating unwittingly is the question of, are they meeting the requirements of being an active employee under the benefits plan, thereby the travel coverage, right? So like in my partner's case, he still gets a salary, but I think it could be challenged. And so but I think Claudia took care of him and got him the appropriate individual coverage, because there was also a COVID consideration there. And he's good, at least as far as the insurance. But just an observation, any comments you'd have, Alan, if you've ever seen people through your involvement in the industry get caught in that sort of pickle, as it were?
No, like as long as they're under the requirements that they're not pushing that limit, then insurance companies usually, for the most part, stay away from those gray areas. If he's outside those limits, or if anyone's outside those limits, then yeah, for sure, they'd be deemed as not payable if something were to happen.
Yeah, no, fair comment. Yeah, again, I realize that you're, correct me if I'm wrong, operating more in the individual travel insurance.
That would be like that. No, that's okay. That would be like that in almost every case. Like with almost every travel insurance, whether it's credit cards or benefits or anywhere else. If they're under the definitions or requirements within that policy, then they're still okay. Even though he might be, it depends on, again, I don't know his policy and all that, but if they're within that limit, then they're fine still.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make is that group policies, and Lori would certainly know this, determine eligibility based on hours worked, right? It's not based on how much you get paid or anything like that. So if push came to shove, and, you know, in my partner Ron's case, is Ron working, you know, whatever the bar is, 20, 25, 30, it depends on the contract, hours per week, and how would you even figure that out? So I'm not expecting our group here, I don't have an answer for that. But
well, I wonder though, Mike, if what'll happen after this is if perhaps the more the gray areas will suddenly become spotlight areas, right? Because remember, these companies are in business to make money, and paying claims doesn't make them money.
Looking at insurance side, obviously, the difference between life insurance and mortgage insurance, there's like differences in there. So if I'm looking at the travel insurance side and I have credit card coverage, is there a difference between that and standalone policy? And then I guess, well, maybe the policy that's in a group benefits plan? Like, is there a generalized understanding of the differences between the three from, I guess, a coverage and whatever standpoint?
If a credit card is providing travel insurance coverage, group benefits, for the most part, what they cover and how they cover things are generally the same. Doesn't matter where it is. The differences might be the finer details, the age limits, how long you can go for, the pre-existing conditions, the stability. Those details might differ and might be a little bit more restricted on credit cards and that stuff, but the rest of it, benefits and how they cover it, are generally the same. Credit cards are covered by, say, a Manulife policy. Well, Manulife has their Manulife policy with group benefits, or also with a regular travel insurance standalone, right?
And I think, Mike, and I would say that for the most part, group benefit travel insurance is significantly more robust because it doesn't have that high exclusion list that you will find in credit card coverage. And I mean, I think any coverage, and we all know this in this room, any coverage when it comes to insurance is all based on the exclusions. How long is that list?
When can I go to Maui, Alan?
Tomorrow. Today.
Yes,
We're all going. We're all going.
I definitely go.
I just continue to be astounded, though. I know this is a sidebar rant, but I am absolutely astounded at the most vulnerable part of our population are the people willing to take the most chance. And, you know, and I have heard snowbirds say, oh, well, it's not like that in this area, right? Oh, it's not like that in this, you've heard that too, Tracy, you know, and so then it just makes me wonder where
I've got a few clients that are down south. Don't ask me how they got there, but they're there.
maybe they flew over it like my client said, borders don't matter.
Yeah, they park their
I guess
motorhomes
when
at
you're
home,
facing
but they're there. Yeah.
minus 20 degrees and white stuff for 3 months, you can rationalize a lot.
Absolutely. If you have the finances to support yourself, right?
Alan, I believe that I heard if you travel to Hawaii from Canada, they only make you quarantine for 3 days. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, every place in the U.S. has their own. Every state is a little bit different. I don't think Florida you don't even have to quarantine, which, you know, right or wrong, it's every state is different.
So then how would the coverage, because you had said before that in the 14-day quarantine, or somebody was saying in the 14-day quarantine period, you would be considered having a pre-existing condition. How does that factor in?
So that when Claudia was saying that means that if you just get down south or anywhere to that matter, and you felt some symptoms and you wanted to go get tested and you get tested and you're actually positive, it doesn't matter what kind of treatment you need, it's going to be an exclusion because you're within that time. You know, like how with COVID, symptoms don't necessarily rise until up to 14 days after.
Okay.
So if you got there on the 3rd day, you start getting symptoms. Well, they look at, 2 weeks back, you were still back in Canada or your home province, and it would be into the exclusion of that stability rider or that stability period. So if you need 180 days of stability, well, you don't have that because you had COVID, within that period, or that test within that period.
So it stands outside what the state rule is for quarantine, and it comes down to the rule within the policy that you have purchased.
Correct. The industry is very unique with traveling because we've heard even a Halifax travel agency, what they've done for that province is because I don't think they've had any cases in the last little while. So they worked with Cuba, and they worked with a couple all-inclusive places, and they are chartering all these Halifax people to Cuba. No quarantine needed. It's all-inclusive, just for them. No one else no one else is there. So the industry, there's a demand. People are going to go.
And I think that's a good last word. So I thank everybody, as always, for coming out. I'm very appreciative of that. I hope you found value in the information. Next week, we're going to have our last word on all of this SHifT for 2020. So let's leave it positively. We'll see you next time. And thanks again for coming in.